Helbrecht, the current High Marshal of the Black Templars, the greatest naval commander in the Adeptus Astartes, and the overall commander of all Space Marine warships during the Third War for Armageddon. But first, let's start from the beginning. High Marshal Helbrecht embodies the qualities of stubbornness, personal honor, and unswerving loyalty to the Emperor of mankind inherent in the Black Templars chapter. Early in Helbrecht's career, it was clear he was destined for greatness. It was his qualities of bloody-mindedness and stubborn determination that elevated him above the rest of the Astartes of his chapter. His rise through the Black Templars was swift, as his desire to slay the enemies of the Emperor impressed his peers with its sheer ferocity. Even as an initiate, Helbrecht fought with zeal and courage beyond expectations, holding the line against a vast swarm of Tyranids at Deathcore Ridge, refusing to yield whilst there yet remained a foe to fight. Helbrecht served in the Vinculus Crusade that took place in 833 M41. Still a lowly neophyte at the time, Helbrecht was merely a witness to the dramatic events of the campaign. Under the command of the legendary High Marshal Ludaldus, the Black Templars fought alongside Inquisitor Vinculus and the Sisters of Battle of the Order of the Bloody Rose against Chaos Death Cult warriors upon the blighted world of Pelaragon IV. Just a few short solar decades later, Helbrecht was inducted into the Sword Brethren for the legendary feat of besting a Daemon Prince with only his combat blade. As part of Marshal Daidine's crusade, Helbrecht fought with courage and furious zeal for many solar decades, eventually rising to the rank of Marshal in command of the crusade upon Daidine's death. Many solar decades later in 990 M41, when High Marshal Cordal was slain by a frenzied Khornate berserker, the Marshals of the Black Templars gathered to select a new leader. Helbrecht was unanimously elected as the new High Marshal, and was ritually presented with the Sword of the High Marshals, the most sacred relic of the Black Templars. This mighty power sword is said to contain fragments of the weapon wielded by Rogel Dorn when he accompanied the Emperor onto Horus' flagship the Vengeful Spirit in the final hours of the Siege of Terra. It was the decree of the Black Templars' founding High Marshal Sigismund that the weapon be carried by all subsequent High Marshals, so that they would forever be reminded of their duty to atone for the Emperor's mortal wounding by incorporating pieces of Dorn's original sword in its forging. Following his ascension, Helbrecht immediately declared a crusade against the Scythor fiends of the Ghoul Stars. That became known as the Ghoul Stars Crusade, taking the fight into that desolate region of space that no previous Imperial expedition had ever returned from that area of the galaxy. Within 8 standard years, the Xenos population of the outlying Ghoul Star systems had been exterminated, and the crusade pushed onwards to the aliens' homeworld. But upon reaching the core systems, they were found to be eerily empty. No trace of the aliens could be found, but before a proper investigation could be launched, a desperate call for help came from the besieged hive world of Armageddon. The dreaded Orc warlord Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka had returned at the head of a massive Orc Wa, the likes which had not been seen in Imperial history since the Olenor Crusade. The Third War for Armageddon had begun. 3 crusades of the Black Templars mustered at the chapter keep on Furgax and departed for the Segmentum Solar after observing the correct prayers and devotions to the Emperor. Upon arrival in the Armageddon system, Helbrecht was put in overall command of the assembled Adeptus Astartes fleet drawn from several different chapters. As the High Marshal possessed the most naval experience of any of the Astartes officers present. Meanwhile, Marshals Ricard and Amalric took their crusades to the surface of Armageddon. The war in orbit was bitterly fought, with Helbrecht leading many boarding actions against Orc space hulks, and together with the Imperial Navy Admiral Peral's battle fleet, these actions effectively crippled the Orc invasion. As the space hulk believed to be Gazkul's flagship retreated from Armageddon, Helbrecht swore a great oath to pursue the Orc warlord, Commissar Yarrick, the hero of Armageddon, petitioned Helbrecht for the honor of accompanying the Black Templars in their quest. It is a measure of the respect in which the High Marshal held the venerable commissar that his request was granted. Helbrecht and Yarrick pursued Ghazghkull across the galaxy. However, while they were able to corner his flagship Kill Rekka, Ghazghkull was able to escape into the warp and ultimately begin his great war. In 930 M41, the forces of the infamous Necron overlord Imhotep the Stormlord, pharaoh of the powerful Sautek dynasty, descended upon the frozen plains of the imperial ice world of Schrödinger 7. The Necrons drove the local defenders to the shelter of the cryonite mines, but were unable to prevent the planet's astropathic choir from dispatching a distress hymnal. A counterattack swiftly arrived in the form of a Black Templar strike force under the command of Marshal Helbrecht. Imhotep was not caught by surprise so easily, and had already shifted his undying Necron armies into a formidable defensive configuration. Helbrecht led the assault, intended as a crippling alpha strike, but was instead blunted by a series of impeccably planned Necron ambushes on the drop pod and Thunderhawk drop zones. As the frozen caverns echoed to the roar of explosions, and scores of Black Templars and Necrons alike were hurled into rivers of molten cryonite. Eventually, Imhotep and Helbrecht met in single combat atop the stalactite heavy span of an ice bridge. In the battle that followed, Helbrecht, driven by zeal and hatred of the Xenos, dealt Imhotep a dozen ruinous blows, but each time the Pharaon's living necrodermis was able to quickly repair in a matter of seconds. Despite being the better swordsman, Helbrecht failed to land a truly crippling blow on his opponent, and as the duel drew on, the Marshal finally collapsed under the assault of the Necron Lord, blood flowing from a score of serious wounds. However, instead of finishing off his opponent, Imhotep brought his scythe down and merely severed Helbrecht's right hand, to remind the Marshal of his much-deserved defeat. Helbrecht roared in fury and pain as Imhotep pitched him off the ice bridge to the frigid cavern floor far below. The surviving Black Templars quickly rallied to their fallen Marshal's side and made a fighting retreat, leaving Schrödinger 7 in the Stormlord's hands. Following this humiliating defeat, Helbrecht swore an oath of vengeance against the Necrons in general, and Imhotep in particular, vowing that the next time they met, only one would leave the battlefield alive. Helbrecht would get his chance at fulfilling his oath of vengeance when his Crusade fleet detected Necron activity around the world of Devatas. Moving swiftly to intercept, Helbrecht rejoiced when their quarry was identified as the inevitable conqueror, Imhotep's personal Cairn-class toonship and flagship. Moving in with all haste, the Black Templar battle barge Sigismund managed to land crippling blows on the inevitable conqueror's propulsive array, stranding it in place. Intending to get his revenge on his opponent personally, Helbrecht ordered an immediate teleport and boarding torpedo assault upon the Necron toonship, and within solar minutes, the decks of the inevitable conqueror were swarming with vengeful Black Templars Astartes. Alas, Helbrecht would not even get the satisfaction of seeing his opponent. While Imhotep's pride urged him to fight, logic won out, and the Stormlord teleported himself and many of his most valuable assets away from his flagship to his unengaged escort ships. The Necrons immediately accelerated away from the fighting and made good their escape. Fuming with impotent rage, Helbrecht could only gain a meager measure of satisfaction from ensuring the total destruction of the inevitable conqueror by setting it on a collision course with the closest star. The frustrated Helbrecht reaffirmed his oath of vengeance, swearing once again that he would see Imhotep definitively dead. Those Black Templars, with some familiarity with the undying Necrons, fear that their Marshal has bitten off more than he can chew. While Helbrecht is certainly capable of besting the Necron Pharaoh in single combat, preventing the undying mechanical fiend from teleporting to safety, and destroying Imhotep outright may prove to be an impossible feat for a single chapter of Space Marines, no matter their zeal. In the aftermath of the Great Rift's creation, the Black Templars lost contact with several of their crusades. Helbrecht, though, still believes the lost crusades are still alive, and are continuing to fight the Imperium's enemies. While he was still hunting for Warlord Ghazghkull, he was visited by Lord Commander Guilliman about several matters concerning his chapter. At first, Helbrecht worried the Black Templars would be censured for not following the Codex Astartes that Guilliman had written. But the Lord Commander made no mention of this. Instead, he sought to convince the High Marshal to accept the ability to create Primaris Space Marines and accept Grey Shields into the Black Templars' ranks. Guilliman did so in person, because the openly fanatical chapter were deemed amongst the most temperamentally unpredictable in how they would react to the Primaris creation. The Lord Commander knew that if Helbrecht accepted them, then his approval would spread throughout the Black Templars' forces. The High Marshal readily did so, as he attributed a spark of the divine to the technology to create Primaris. With that settled, the two then began to clash over Helbrecht's utterly focused pursuit of Warlord Ghazghkull. The Lord Commander reminded the High Marshal of the oaths he swore to protect the Emperor's realm. Rather than just carrying out his own vendettas, Helbrecht was shamed by Guilliman's words and sought to immediately rectify his failings. The High Marshal then promoted a number of his most seasoned sword brethren to the rank of Marshal and bade them to muster new crusades. The Black Templars' Primaris Grey Shields were also mingled into the Marshal's forces to ensure they were accepted. Helbrecht then oath-swore these new crusades, including Marshal Holger's Purgus Crusade, to aid all those worlds of the ecclesiarchy that lay perilously along the Great Rift's border. With his duty done, the High Marshal renewed his vow to pursue Ghazghkull to the ends of the Emperor's realm and continued his quest to hunt down the warlord. As part of Fleet Primus, Helbrecht led a task force which saved the world of Sigma Ulstari from Tyrannid and Orc forces in the Octarius War. During the battle, Helbrecht slew the war boss Tuskagrab World Killer. Recently, Helbrecht crossed the Rubicon Primaris and became a Primaris Space Marine.